All right, time to dive in. We are tackling Cooper Chapter 30 today, and let me tell you, this one's all about unlocking a secret weapon for making learning stick. Generalization.
It's that thing where, when a skill actually sticks, it's not just for that practice test, it's for the real world.
Totally. It's like acing the recipe in your kitchen versus whipping up something amazing, on the fly at a friend's place.
It's about that transfer of learning. And you know what? The chapter kicks off with Sherry. Remember her? She was crushing that spreadsheet training.
Oh, total rock star, right. What happened?
Well, reality hit. Back at her desk, training wheels are off, and boom, those spreadsheet superpowers, gone.
Ouch. Talk about a motivation killer. So it's not just about, time passing, but also what happens when we leave that comfy learning bubble.
Exactly. It's about the setting, a key factor in generalization. The book talks about Ricardo, who was killing it at the vocational center, nailing every task.
Okay, so he's got the skills down.
But then new work environment, different vibes, and those habits vanish.
So our skills can be, glued to the place we learned them.
Yeah.
That's wild. But what about when, you learn something and then you use it in the wrong situation?
Ah, yes. The across behaviors piece of generalization. Think of Brian. Learn to greet people with, "Hello, how are you?" Good start, right?
Yeah, classic.
Except he uses it for every interaction. Doesn't matter who, doesn't matter the situation. Every single time.
Oh, no, poor Brian. I think someone needs to introduce him to, hey, or a good what's up.
Right, so you see, new skills are popping up, but not always in the way we'd hoped.
Okay, so before we unleash a million greetings on Brian, let's break down this whole generalization thing. What are we even talking about here?
In a nutshell, it's about behavior change that sticks around, and it has three key parts. First up, you got doability, which basically means the behavior sticks around. Then you've got settings and situations. Can it handle a change of scenery? And finally, that ripple effect across behaviors, do those related skills start to emerge?
It's not a one-hit wonder, it's a whole album. Consistency, adaptability, and sparking those positive chain reactions.
This is making me think about learning math in school. I was killing it in the classroom, solving all the problems, but then real life throws a budget at me and panic.
Exactly. It's the classic instructional setting versus generalization setting. The classroom is controlled, predictable, real life chaos.
So just because someone nails the test or the simulation doesn't mean they're ready for the real-world version.
Exactly. That's why the more those settings resemble each other, the better. And that's where some of the tactics we'll be digging into come in.
Okay, before we get to those tactics, big question. Why should I care about all this generalization stuff? What's in it for me?
Well, think of it this way. Whether it's prepping for a big presentation, learning a new language, or even just picking up a new hobby, generalization is the key to turning those efforts into lasting changes.
So it's about making sure those skills actually show up when it matters, not just when we're in our comfort zones. Absolutely. And if you're a parent, a teacher, a coach, anyone who helps others learn, this is your toolkit for making those changes last. We're talking strategies to make learning feel more real world, ways to max out those aha moments, and even how to teach the skill of generalization.
A toolkit for making learning stick. Sign me up. What's first?
Well, this chapter is jam-packed, but one that really stands out is the behavior trap. Picture a mousetrap, right? You got the cheese, it's irresistible, the mouse goes for it, SNAP, success, basically guaranteed.
Okay, but hopefully our learning journey is a little less snappy. So how do we build one of these traps for, good habits, minus the cheese in cages preferably?
Right, so the book gives this great example about this guy who gets dragged to a bowling alley, dreading it, right?
The worst.
But here's the thing, he starts playing and he realizes, hey, bowling is kind of challenging. He's into it. And on top of that, he ends up connecting with the other bowlers.
So he stumbles into this whole social thing he enjoys. Suddenly, bowling night isn't so bad.
Exactly. Went from being dragged there to practically living at the bowling alley. It's all about setting up those conditions where the desired behavior just naturally unfolds. That's a behavior trap in action.
Clever. So how do we find those cheeses in real life, those things that are naturally motivating?
Well, the book actually talks about a teacher who noticed her student was obsessed with, get this, baseball cards.
Smart teacher. Work with it, right?
Exactly. She created this whole baseball card club. Kids could actually use their card knowledge for all these learning activities. Talk about a win-win.
That's amazing. So it's about spotting those natural interests, those built-in cheeses, and then getting creative about how to connect them to the, actual learning goals. So clever. Okay, what else you got?
Another game changer, Remembering that everyone learns differently. We got to teach the full range of relevant situations and how to respond in each.
So showing just one example isn't enough. Diversity.
Yes. And more than just diversity, we need to strategically choose the right examples, to show the full spectrum of what a learner might encounter. They call it general case analysis.
Ooh, fancy. So not just any examples. It's like we need the greatest hits collection for learning.
Exactly. The book talks about this study about teaching kids how to use vending machines.
Important life skill.
Right. So teaching them on just one type of vending machine didn't really translate well to other machines because each one has its own quirks, right? Different buttons, maybe it takes a card instead of cash.
Oh, tell me about it. I swear some of those machines are designed to eat dollar bills.
Right. But imagine if during the learning they were shown all the variations, the coin slots, different button layouts, even the ones that are super picky about dollar bills, they'd be ready for anything. That's general case analysis in action.
Prepared for all the vending machine drama. Love it.
Yeah.
Speaking of real-world situations, any tips on how to make that learning environment, I don't know, feel more real?
Absolutely. The more we can bridge that gap between practice and the real deal, the better. The chapter mentions this football coach used to blast the opponent's fight song during practice.
Wow. Intense.
Talk about immersive.
Yeah.
He wanted his players to feel that game day energy, even in practice. It's called programming common stimuli. Basically, the more overlap there is between where you're learning and where you'll use that knowledge, the smoother the transition.
It's like flight simulators. You don't just toss someone the keys to a jumbo jet. They practice in a setting that feels real.
Exactly. And think about situations where you can't perfectly replicate the real world. You can't exactly practice ice skating in a classroom. But they talk about how, for a child with autism, they use rollerblades and cones to mimic an ice rink.
So even those little overlaps, those familiar cues, they can make a big difference. Okay, this next strategy sounds a little counterintuitive. Teach it loosely. I feel like I thrive in, structured chaos at best.
I hear you. But it's not about ditching structure altogether. It's more about recognizing that being too rigid can actually work against generalization.
So we don't want someone to learn something so specifically that they can't adapt when things change, even a little.
Exactly. Imagine a student who can only follow instructions if the teacher uses a certain tone of voice, right? Or think about, someone who can only put something together if the parts are arranged just so. That lack of flexibility, it can be a real problem.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. So how do we teach loosely without creating total chaos?
It's all about varying the non-essential parts of the learning environment on purpose. Change up the teacher's position, their tone, even just the decorations in the room.
So it's like shaking things up just enough so learners don't get stuck on those irrelevant details.
Exactly. We're training their brains to zero in on what matter.
Love that. Train those adaptable minds.
Yeah.
Okay, what about when the natural consequences for a behavior just aren't cutting it? How do we give those rewards a boost?
That's where things get even more interesting. We can tap into something called programming indiscriminable contingencies.
Okay, my brain just did a loop-de-loop. English, please.
Basically, we're making it tougher for someone to predict when those rewards are coming. See, when we're first learning, those clear, immediate rewards, they're super helpful. But as we get closer to actually using that knowledge in the real world, predictability can backfire.
Wait, so if someone gets used to a reward every single time, they might be like, why bother if there's no instant gratification?
Exactly. That's why we introduce a little mystery. Keeps them engaged, keeps them trying, even if they don't know exactly when that reward's coming.
Oh, it's like those gamified apps. They get you hooked because you never know when you'll, hit the jackpot or level up.
You got it. The power of unpredictability. One way to do this is intermittent reinforcement. So instead of a reward every single time, we space it out, keep them guessing.
So it's like giving a dog a treat only sometimes when they sit. Keeps them on their toes.
Right. The dog learns that sitting might get them a treat, but no guarantees. Keeps them engaged. The book also mentions delaying rewards as a strategy.
So you do the thing, but the reward comes later. Does that really work?
It does. They talked about a study where students were praised and rewarded after school for behavior they did during math class.
Interesting. So the reward was still tied to the behavior, just not immediate.
And get this. Those students, their behavior, it improved not just in math class, but also in spelling, even though there were no rewards for their spelling.
Whoa. So that delayed reward made it harder to pinpoint exactly when their good behavior was paying off, so they just kept being good. They, accidentally generalize good behavior.
Exactly. And you know what else works wonders for generalization? Bringing in those VIPs. Parents, teachers, coworkers, anyone who can help reinforce those new skills out in the wild.
So it's about building a support system. The learner isn't alone.
Absolutely. It's about teamwork. Sometimes it's as simple as asking those folks to, pay attention to the learner's progress, give them some genuine encouragement when they see those skills in action.
Like a cheer squad for positive change. Okay, before we break out the pom-poms, I'm ready for more strategies. We've covered so much already, but I can tell there's more to this whole generalization thing. All right, more tools for the toolkit. I'm still kind of stuck on this idea of, actually teaching someone to generalize. It's one thing to learn a skill, but another to actually use it in different areas of life, right? Is that really something you can teach?
It is, and it might be simpler than you think. One tactic is encouraging what they call response variability. Basically, rewarding someone for coming up with different solutions, different approaches, like thinking outside the box.
Okay, yeah, that totally clicks for me. I get bored doing the same thing over and over. And I learn way better when I can get a little creative.
Exactly. And the chapter talks about the study where kids got to choose different activities in the classroom. And when they were rewarded for trying new things, they were more engaged. And they actually ended up learning more because they were exposed to a wider range of activities and skills.
So by mixing it up, trying those new approaches, they basically became awesome generalizers without even realizing it.
Precisely. It's about cultivating those adaptable minds, the ones who see connections, apply their knowledge in flexible ways, and sometimes all it takes is a little nudge in the right direction.
You mean like just saying, hey, remember that thing you learned? Think you can use it here?
Sometimes it really is that simple. Just by making that connection super clear, you're planting a seed, encouraging them to actually think about how they can apply what they've learned.
It's like a little reminder to break free from the textbook, right? Not get stuck in just one way of doing things. Okay, so we've covered all these strategies for making learning stick, but how do we make sure those changes last? I don't want these hard-earned skills fading away, like my New Year's resolutions.
The key is to think of it like taking off training wheels. You don't just rip them off all at once.
Oh, definitely not.
Yeah.
Unless you want a meltdown. And probably some scraped knees.
Right. You got to do it gradually, make sure the rider can balance on their own. Same with learning. The book actually gave this example of a man learning to get dressed on his own. And they started with this visual cue. It was a clock that showed him what time he needed to be ready.
Okay, so a nice, clear, visual reminder to keep him on track.
Exactly. And then they slowly faded that cue out. They gave him more clothes to put on, shortened the time limit little by little.
And he was able to do it all by himself on time, like magic.
Exactly. They shifted those supports, those training wheels, to the natural consequences of getting dressed on time. Like being ready for work, school, whatever it was.
So subtle, but so smart. Okay, any other pro tips for really leveling up our generalization game?
Absolutely. The chapter ends with these great guiding principles for promoting generalization.
Hit me.
First up, minimize the need for generalization whenever possible.
Wait, really? I thought we were going for maximum generalization.
I know, right? But it's about strategy. If you know someone needs to learn a very specific skill for a very specific situation, just teach it to them directly. Don't make them generalize from something else if you don't have to.
So if they need to learn a specific bus route, teach them that route. Don't just give them a general understanding of how buses work.
Exactly. Focus on those essential skills for maximum impact. And here's another big one. Check for generalization before, during, and after you're teaching.
So don't just assume it's happening. Put it to the test.
Yes. That gives you the data to see if it's actually working, if you need to switch things up.
Data-driven generalization. I love it. What else?
Get those VIPs involved. We've talked about that support system, right? Make sure everyone's on the same page. Parents, teachers, whoever's around to reinforce those skills in the real world.
Teamwork. Okay, this is all fantastic, but let's be real. Sometimes life throws curveballs. Any advice for when it feels like generalization is just not happening?
The book actually made a great point about that. It said to be willing to get creative. If a learner needs some extra support, don't be afraid to think outside the box.
So if something isn't clicking, don't give up. Try something new. Find a workaround.
Exactly. Remember, generalization, it's a journey. It's not a destination. It's going to look different for everyone.
That is so true. Okay, we covered a ton today. From bowling alleys and baseball cards to the power of a well-placed nudge and The magic of slow and steady.
We explored how to make learning stick, how to adapt to new situations, and how to really build those skills that last.
And on that note, I have a little challenge for you. What's one skill, one area of your life where you'd love to see a little generalization boost?
Take a second, think about it. Maybe it's that language you've always wanted to learn. Maybe it's rocking that presentation at work. Or maybe it's something as simple as sticking to that new exercise routine.
Whatever it is, remember, you got the tools now. Pick one strategy, just one tiny tweak, and try it out. You might just surprise yourself with how powerful even the smallest changes can be.
And remember, generalization is a skill we can all keep developing no matter where we are on our learning journey.
Beautifully said. Thanks for diving into generalization with us today. Until next time, happy learning.